So we approach questions 32 to 35. At this point, time will likely be very precious in the exam, so we'll try and get through this as quickly as possible. All of the questions require jotting back and forth between the large amount of text and the chart, so let's quickly break down the information in the text. Vegetable oils other than olive oil were not introduced in significant amounts into the human diet until the early part of the 20th century. Some people believe that because we are the genetic product of the hunter-gatherer culture, these are not natural to us, as they do not match the certain balances of nutrients that humans had when they fed on things such as grain, berries, animals, and most of our fat came from animal carcasses. They go on to argue that there's not been enough time since those days for evolution to have changed the nutritional requirements of humans. Vegetable oils used in cooking, salad oils, margarine, and processed foods can supply around 15% of the daily energy intake in a Western diet. This has had the result of raising the dietary ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 to its current value of closer to 15 to 1. In hunter-gatherer days, this used to be 2 to 1. Recent research has indicated that there are benefits to the heart from eating fats which have a high polyunsaturated content, which is what vegetable oils are thought to have. An increase in 5% polyunsaturated fat leads to a 10% drop in heart disease. Some key factors which are thought to lead to a healthy diet are the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, the level of erucic acid. In 2003, the Food Standards Australia set a provisional tolerable daily intake, PTDI, of about 500 milligrams a day. The percentage of polyunsaturates. It's recommended that adults get no more than 11% of their fats from unsaturated fats. Vegetable oils have 3,700 kilojoules per 100 gram of energy. The typical daily fat consumption of an adult in the EU is estimated in the year 2015 to be 143 grams, 30% of which comes from vegetable oils. We're also given a table summary of the fatty acid composition of a number of common oils. This brings us on to question 19, which asks us, what is the polyunsaturated content of a 50-50 mixture of olive oil and sunflower oils as a percentage of the mass of the mixture? This is more straightforward than may appear. This is actually more straightforward than may appear. All of these values are in grams per 100 grams of oil. So 65.7 of the polyunsaturated fat we can see in sunflower oil is actually 65.7%. So you can write that down. Whereas when it comes to olive oil, we have 9.2 and 0.8, both polyunsaturated, so that gives a total of 10%. If you were to combine the two, we get 75.7 grams in 200 grams from the two columns of oil. So in order to work out per 100 gram, i.e. the percentage, we should divide by 2. This gives us 37.85%, which is closest to the option A, which is 37.9%, which is our answer. Question 33 asks, which one of the following 5 options is an assumption made in thinking that the optimal ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 is 2 to 1, namely the one mentioned as the hunter-gatherer ratio. So without going through all 5 options, we can say straight away that the assumption would probably be that this is the optimal ratio, namely the hunter-gatherers had a better ratio than we do in the modern world, which is 15 to 1. So if we were to look at the options, here we can say that A has almost a verbatim answer to what I just said, that the balance of nutrients that humans had when they fed on hunter-gatherer diets was more appropriate than the balance they get from modern diets. So 2 to 1 versus 15 to 1. So we can say our answer is A. Moving on to question 34, we're told that if the only vegetable oil used by a typical European consumer is canola oil, what is his or her intake of erucic acid as a percentage of the PTDI, the thing identified earlier as 500 milligrams of erucic acid per day? Well, what does a European consumer consume when it comes to vegetable oil? Well, we know that it's 143 grams, 30 of which is from vegetable oil, which we can work out to be roughly 50 grams for our purposes. So let's look at the table. Canola oil has 0.6 grams of erucic acid per 100 grams of oil. We only have 50 grams of oil being consumed, so we can halve this value and get 0.3 grams of oil, which is 300 milligrams, which is around 60% of 500 milligrams. If we look at the answers, we can see that B is 52%, and this is the closest to our value, and we can say that this is our answer. Finally, question 35 asks, what would be the percentage of flaxseed oil in a mix of flaxseed and sunflower oils between these two if the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio was 2 to 1? So the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio has to be 2 to 1. So we can experiment and see what would happen if we were to have a 50-50 mix. So let's add these two values to get 78.4. And because there is no omega-3 in sunflower oil, that can help see where we are after that. So we end up with 78.4 to 53.3. So this is not quite a 2 to 1 ratio. We need a bit more omega-3, and that means because there is no omega-3 in sunflower oil, we need a hell of a lot more flaxseed oil. So we can start by experimenting and doing a 50-50 mix of these two by just adding these values and seeing where we are out of a total of 200 grams of oil. So we see we have 78.4 omega-6 from adding these two, and 53.3 from just the omega-3 which is in flaxseed oil. There is no omega-3 in sunflower oil. As we can see, this is close but not quite a 2 to 1 ratio. We need less omega-3 or more omega-6. So that implies that we need to have more sunflower oil because this has more omega-6 relative to omega-3. So the percentage of flaxseed must be less than 50%, but not by much. Looking at the answers, it would probably be most sensible at this point, given it's the last question, to guess 41%. But we can do the calculation and see if we're right. The easiest thing to do would be to test out 20%, and if that's too steep a gradient, we know that 40% is the right answer. 20% is easier to manipulate, as you can just divide by 5. So 12.7% divided by 5 would be about 2.5, so you can write that down. And then we'd have to add 80% of 65.7, which if we can say is around 55. And then we can take 0.2% of our 53.3 here, which we can assume to be about 11. And then we can see that the ratio is far greater than 2 to 1. So that means that we should have moderated and gone with D, which is the right answer.